Welcome back to another Mobalytics tier list video, and today we're going over all of the changes you need to know about for patch 12.5, which has hit the Rift today. We're going to shift things up a little bit today, so we'll cover the tier list for the new patch and all the big changes you need to know about before you jump into game. Let us know what you think of this new format in the comments below. So let's get started with that top lane. In the God tier, we've got Garen, Kayle and Yorick. Urgot is going to fall out of the God tier mainly due to those Hullbreaker nerfs. He's still a powerhouse in Low-Elo though, so he's going to sit comfortably in the S tier for now. Sejuani and Quinn have both moved up to the S tier after gradually increasing their popularity and their win rates. Riven moves up to the A tier just because of how crazy this champion is in the current meta, despite being a pretty difficult champion to learn. In High-ELO though, she's actually one of the best champions in the game at the moment. Kennen is going to move up to the A tier too, and we'll go into some more detail about that one shortly. There are a fair few champions that are also moving down though. Gragas, Rumble, Fiora, Jax, Yone and Lilia are all moving down to that B tier as they just haven't been performing as well in Low-Elo recently. So what is actually changing in the top lane this patch? Well, the main thing is Hullbreaker. Hullbreaker has been heavily prioritised over the last few weeks, especially in High-Elo. The Hullbreaker playstyle is extremely effective at the moment, and people have basically been rushing this item on anyone that builds AD. Riot are nerfing this item quite significantly for ranged users, which means Urgot, Graves, Akshan, Jace and so on will likely no longer be able to abuse this strategy as easily. Those melee Hullbreaker champions are still going to be very strong though, and likely just as popular. Make sure you're prepared to see a lot more of Yorick this patch. So as we briefly mentioned earlier, Kennen got some pretty juicy buffs this patch to his W's 4th attack damage. The damage has been buffed at all ranks, plus the bonus AD ratio and the AP ratio have both gone up. This is going to contribute pretty heavily to his ability to bully lanes early game with those auto attacks, and it will also help out his short trades around his 4th auto attack, Q and W combo. Kennen's main strengths though lie in his ability to get stuck into teams and influence teamfights with his huge AoE damage and CC, so this buff isn't going to do too much in that scenario. What it might do though is actually help you get further ahead in the early game, which is only going to make you stronger for when you get into those teamfights. Kennen has always been a really solid pick in competitive league, flex and clash, but he's not been quite as effective in solo queue, hence why he's not been higher up on this list previously. This buff will encourage more people to give him a go though, and we do think he'll get a decent jump in his popularity this patch. We've moved him up to the A tier for now, and we'll keep an eye out for how he performs over the next few weeks. Garen has been absolutely dominating Low-Elo top lane for pretty much the entirety of Season 12. Ever since those teleport nerfs came in, he's been allowed to be more selfish, stay in lane and just bully his opponent without any worry of them influencing the map more than him. Garen just has everything that you need to win that top lane. He has obvious high damage, burst, wave clear and all-in potential, but he also has the ridiculous innate sustain that just makes him impossible to force out of lane. All he has to do is walk back to his turret for a while and wait until his health is back up to a respectable amount, then just come back into lane and try and kill you again. It's just so easy to get a lead on this champion, especially post 6, and then you can keep that lead so simply and just basically kill your opponent on repeat. If Garen does get ganked, he can just focus on bursting the squishier target and laugh as they die due to not respecting him. Garen may lack the team fighting qualities that a huge amount of top laners have, but his ability to just win lane and become impossible to deal with are why he's still such a great option this patch. Quinn has been flying high for quite a few weeks now, ever since a small buff that encouraged people to pick her up again. Quinn has historically just been known as a champion that you pick when you want a ranged champion to abuse certain matchups. However, now she's basically being picked against anything and everything. It's very easy to win lanes with your ranged advantage on Quinn and then to start snowballing, but it's also very easy to roam and influence the map with the mobility that your ultimate provides. You can simply just shove top and then look to all in or dive, and if this isn't an option, you just press R, run mid and kill them instead. Quinn became popular as a great answer to the roaming support top laners for this reason too, but actually she's kept her place in the meta as those other supports have died off. Quinn deals some unbelievable damage when she's ahead, and her burst is not to be underappreciated. If you're playing an AD carry and enjoying farming up and then a fed Quinn walks into your lane, you simply don't exist anymore. Let's move on to the jungle now, and in the God tier we've got Rammus, Nocturne and Trundle. Nunu has fallen out of the God tier after his nerfs last patch, but is still more than happy in the S tier. Volibear, Mordekaiser and Skarner all move up tiers this patch after finding some real success and a big spike in their play rate. Xin Zhao's nerfs bring him down a tier, and some of the other less common junglers in Rumble, Gragas and Olaf unfortunately move down into the C tier as they are just not performing well at all right now. So what's changed in the jungle this patch? Well, it was basically just 3 champions. Xin Zhao has received some small nerfs that will actually make a pretty significant impact. Xin Zhao's ultimate duration is down to 4 seconds from 5, and this will be heavily notable in teamfights, as the damage reduction is just one of the many reasons he's just so hard to deal with. His E cooldown is also being nerfed by 1 second, which will hinder his ability to stick to targets relentlessly. Gwen is now going to deal a little bit less damage to monsters with her passive, so it looks as if Riot wants to force her away from that jungle role. She also got her E bonus attack range halved, which will hurt her in the top lane as well. Master Yi is the jungler who received the most amount of changes this patch though. Some of these are quality of life changes which are definitely welcome and do bring this champion up to date a bit. You can now cast your E or your ultimate during your Q, which is always nice, and now the duration of your E and your ultimate no longer decrease when you're channeling Meditate or using Alpha Strike. To get onto the more important stuff though, a lot of these changes do actually seem like nerfs. But what they are doing with these changes is focusing on bringing Master Yi into his more traditional on-hit attack speed itemization build path. The problem with Master Yi is that his lethality one-shot reset build has been way too strong and way too easy to perform well on, and it almost kind of resembles the old AP Yi that some of you may remember. So by shifting the itemization into more attack speed and auto attack focused items, you allow more overall counterplay and more opportunities to shut him down. Now this is not going to change the fact that this champion just slaps everyone in low elo. He's still going to be very hard to deal with when he's fed, and he's still going to be able to farm pentakills if you don't CC him. And for those reasons, Master Yi will be staying in the S tier this patch. Nocturne has been absolutely popping off in low elo recently. He's always had some form of success at low ranks, mainly due to his unpredictability and the effectiveness of that ultimate. He's also fairly straightforward to play and doesn't take long to learn, meaning the majority of junglers tend to have him in their champion pool. Nocturne also has a lot of flexibility with his items at the moment. For example, you've got the one-shot Axiom Arc ultimate spamming carry monster, or you've got the Stridebreaker Death Dance Bruiser powerhouse that can be impossible to kill. Whichever playstyle you go for, Nocturne is undeniably a very strong pick, and his win rate has been gradually increasing for the last few patches. With no changes coming in that affect him, we expect him to continue to perform and continue to rise up in low elo. So Zac is another jungler similar to Nocturne in how he's gradually just getting stronger and stronger. Zac is just a fantastic answer to all of the long range carries and mages in the game right now. Zac's insane distance in his E and his engage just allow him to get onto those carries and truly ruin their games. Zac is one of the most punishing junglers to play against if you lack mobility, and if you don't have flash he can easily get on top of you and basically just remove your ability to play the game. In a meta full of hyper carries, enchanters and scaling mages, Zac has both the early ganks and pressure and the strength to initiate teamfights that work well against these champions in the majority of games. Onto the mid lane now, and in the god tier we've got Ahri, Anivia and Veigar. Vladimir and Nico both jump up a tier after some increased performance over the last patch. Veigar has knocked Vex out of that god tier spot, but she's still performing well and stays in the S tier. Corki and Syndra both moved down to the B tier as their win rates dip, and LeBlanc has unfortunately moved into the C tier as those nerfs recently have really seemed to hurt her. LeBlanc was never as good in low elo as she was in high elo, but to be honest these nerfs have affected her everywhere. Lissandra also moves down from the A tier after a bit of a dip to her play rate and her win rate. So there weren't as many real major changes to the mid lane this patch, although Ahri has received some nerfs and we feel they were definitely welcome. If you've been watching any of our videos recently, you'll know that Ahri has been dominating that mid lane since her mini rework, and she has both the highest pick rate and win rate over the last few patches. These nerfs are bringing down her early damage of her W and E slightly and a bit of her mana costs too, but honestly this is not going to dethrone her anytime soon. Ahri is so versatile at the moment and she can basically carry at any point in the game. She's got early damage and kill threat, she's got a great mid-game power spike, and she even scales pretty well into teamfights now as her damage is not tied completely to landing her charm. Those ultimate resets also mean she can teamfight forever, and this makes her not only much harder to get hold of, but it also allows her to deal a significant amount more damage. Ahri is just such a safe pick this patch. She's hard to lane against, hard to gank, hard to shut down, and just hard to beat in general. Next up we're going to talk about Veigar, and despite receiving some nerfs a few patches ago, this champion is still having a ton of success after his popularity soared after the buffs he received at the start of the season. Veigar is a pretty straightforward champion to play and he's just so simple to be effective on. All you have to do is make it through those early stages of the game without being too far behind, and you're going to find it pretty easy to make a difference in games. Veigar has strong AoE damage with his basic abilities, he has a ridiculously impactful AoE stun that can decide fights or make picks, and his ultimate can completely shut down a specific enemy target in the blink of an eye. Veigar is performing well at all ranks, and even in multiple roles too, as some people are also having success with him in the bot lane. This champion is a fantastic pick so far this season, and as long as you don't get a horrendous matchup, you're probably going to carry. Fizz is another mid lane assassin who's just having a great time so far this season. Fizz is a fantastic answer to all of those scaling and mobile mages, and he can just farm them with his ultimate every time it's off cooldown. Fizz rising to the stage has also likely been part of the reason why certain other mid laners like Corki have really fallen down the pecking order recently. Fizz is not only very difficult to survive lane against, but he's also incredibly slippy and super difficult to shut down. When Fizz starts snowballing, he can genuinely one-shot those carries and the enchanters hiding behind them at the same time. Overall, assassins are still performing just as well as ever, and with so many squishies running around, it makes them excel so much easier. Talon and Qiyana are big champions in higher elos too, but Fizz is the one to go for across all ranks. Moving on to the bottom lane now, and another patch with very few changes in this role. In the god tier, we've got Jhin, Jinx, Vayne and Zeri. Despite receiving some nerfs and some changes, Zeri is still an absolute nuisance, and she's still one of the hardest champions to play against in the game right now. Veigar jumps up to that S tier 2 alongside the newly buffed Seraphine, which although those buffs were aimed at support, we feel she's going to be extremely strong as a bot laner too. Despite having a very low pick rate, her win rate is already really strong. Samira is receiving a minor buff as well, and as a result will jump up to the A tier alongside some of those other similar situational AD carries. The main changes to the bot lane this patch were the buffs to Samira and Seraphine. None of the other changes in this patch really affect this part of the map, so you'll continue to see the same usual suspects dominating games as they have done for this whole season so far. So Samira has been a very all or nothing AD carry pretty much since her release. She either pops off, 1v9s and gets 3 pentakills in a single game, or she basically doesn't do anything whatsoever. She's almost taken the mantle off Draven in terms of hard carry or hard int. Samira's HP and armor per level are both getting buffed, and her ultimate cooldown is now 5 seconds down from 8 seconds. These changes will definitely help her out throughout games, and the ultimate cooldown could enable her to really make a difference in prolonged fights if she doesn't get killed too quickly. Samira remains a very snowbally situational AD carry and one that needs the right draft and the right circumstances to really do her job. But there are going to be games where this champion can 100% carry by herself. Out of all of the god tier AD carries, Vayne is just the one that's performing best at low elo at the moment. Low rank players just do not understand how to beat this champion, and when she gets ahead in lane, they basically just submit and let her walk all over them. Now let's be real, Vayne has had a great season so far, and even despite the nerfs to her itemization at the start of the season, she's still up there with the big guns. Vayne's ability to shred down any type of target with her silver bolts and self-peel and kite with her tumble, ultimate and condemn just make her a fantastic pick in the right hands. Well, although you may be thinking Vayne should be better in high elo than low elo, the difference is these low elo players just don't know how to play against her, and all this does is allow those average Vayne players to abuse this. Tanks are also far more common in low elo too, and we all know that Vayne is just so perfect at taking them down. With this season bringing so many enchanters into the meta, it just makes the laning phase so much easier for this champion. If she gets out of lane safely, she can easily pop off and do her job with just a few items. There are plenty of reasons why Vayne is in that god tier, and we just don't see that changing anytime soon. Brand is also having a brilliant time in the bot lane at the moment. Now, as you all know, famously he's always been picked as a support, but actually he's performing exceptionally well as an AD carry replacement. This could be a great option if your team is lacking AP, or if you just feel like you want to play more aggressively and snowball with the damage this champion provides. Brand bot lane works pretty well with any support as well, whether it's Alistar diving in and locking them up for your damage, or Sona keeping you healed up and helping you poke your enemies down too. Either way, Brand is a fantastic pocket pick and is sitting at a very high win rate in the bot lane at the moment. Give it a go and let us know how you get on. Finally, moving on to support now, and in the god tier we have the exact same champions as last patch, Zyra, Sona and Soraka. Seraphine moves up to the S tier following these recent buffs, and Zilean also jumps up there to join her. Renata Glask is now in the game and she's definitely performing better at higher ranks, but still more than capable of pulling her weight at low elo too. So we put her in the A tier for now. Xerath and Yuumi are both moving down a tier as they just aren't performing as well as they have been. So as we mentioned, Renata Glask arrived last patch and she's made quite an impression already. Riot have already hotfixed and nerfed her since her release, and she's without a doubt making her mark on the Summoner's Rift. Renata just has a ton of tools that make her insanely versatile, and she seems to pair well with almost any bot laner, which means you can basically just pick her in any draft. Renata's kit does take some getting used to though, and her abilities do require a little bit of practice, but if you can get the hang of her, she's definitely more than rewarding. That ultimate is just so much fun to use as well, so give her a go if you haven't already. Seraphine is getting some pretty juicy buffs this patch, and it does feel like this champion has been overshadowed by her enchanting peers for a little while now. While Seraphine is definitely not weak in the later stages of the game, she's had such a tough time getting through that lane phase, and even mid game too, meaning there's just so many better picks to go for. These somewhat substantial buffs to her W and even the small buff on her E will certainly make a difference, and we feel like she's going to come back with a bang this patch. Seraphine's utility, harass, AoE CC, and even to a degree damage make her an incredible all-round pick, and more importantly so in this heavily enchanting focus meta. Be prepared to play against a lot of Seraphines this patch. Finally, we just have to quickly talk about Zilean. This champion has just always been criminally underrated, and he's just having a fantastic season 12 so far. Zilean has typically had more success in higher ranks, but recently, low-elo players are also getting the hang of him and understanding why he's just so OP. Zilean brings consistent AoE CC and damage, he brings movement speed boosts and slows, and of course his ultimate can actually be one of the most pivotal abilities in the entire game. Now he may be a bit squishy and a bit vulnerable in the early game, but as soon as you've got a few items you become a utility monster, capable of persistently outperforming the enemy support by just spamming those abilities. Your passive also gives your teammates XP, which is a ridiculous catch-up mechanic even just for lane phase. Zilean's passive is also pretty damn strong as well. Imagine your level 5 Diana comes into lane, you give them your passive, and now she jumps in with her ultimate and you get a double kill and dragon. That's just how effective this passive can be. A fed hyper carry with a Zilean in their pocket is infinitely more impactful, and honestly even without the stuns, the movement speed boost and ultimate just allows you to get away with so much more. Zilean has jumped up to that S tier for this patch, so don't be afraid to get on the Zilean hype train in 12.5. Well, that's going to conclude our video covering the patch 12.5 low elo tier list and balance changes. We've changed a few things up from our usual tier list format, so if you prefer this way and have any other feedback on things you'd like to see, then let us know in the comments. That's all from us here at Mobalytics, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.